Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
All right, and we are back. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC television podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Casey. So, this episode is going to be slightly different from our previous episodes, because usually I like to kick off things with a Marvel show, but obviously with 2 podcasts a week and Marvel only on once a week, we only really are going to be getting it once a week now that I'm all caught up. But what I would like to go over is Manifest. So I did actually talk about Manifest last week, kind of leading into Season 3. So our first segment, we're going to be starting off with Manifest. Then we'll be diving into Zerozerozero, which I have previously talked about, and I am now finished the season, or possibly the series, which we'll talk about. Then we'll be talking about Mr. Robot. Now, I also just finished Mr. Robot, so there's a good amount to talk about with that too. And we'll be wrapping it up, kind of talking about web series, streaming, award ceremonies, stuff like that, and how it all factors into today's day and age. This will probably be a spoiler-ish episode, so just to give you that heads up. All right. So kicking things off, we are going to first talk about Manifest today. So, as I've said before in our last podcast, Manifest had 2 previous seasons. Season 3 had just started last Thursday, or I guess technically by the airing of this podcast, the Thursday before that. So there will be a second episode by that point. So, it's a mystery show about a plane, and we'll definitely be discussing spoilers this episode, because there's just always a lot to... there's a lot to unwrap with a lot of these shows, and now I'm, kind of back into my, drama swing, instead of, my sitcoms, which I still watch a lot of sitcoms during the week as well. But especially in a show like Manifest, I really want to be able to dive into the more intimate detail, and, maybe, say some theories, or, analyze what's going on in the episode, and then I'd be very curious to hear what everyone else has to think about my theories or your theories, or just what's going on in the show in general. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you love one character, hate another, love acting, writing, whatever it may be? So, I guess we're going to kind of just jump right into it. This episode had 4 main plots or stories to try and follow. So, I guess first up, we had the Vance and Ben storyline. So, we saw that Ben was in Cuba, and we all know that the first episode of Season 3 now takes place 3 months after the finale of Season 2. So, it's obviously, Ben's there because of his vision that he received at the end of Season 2, where the plane exploded and then Ben drew the boat, and they know it's a connection with that, where Ben finds the tail fin of the plane. Now, the really interesting thing is, at some point in time, they're going to have to answer the question of, what happened to these guys? Is it a godly intervention? Is it an alien intervention? And with a lot of the themes that we've been given in this show, these reoccurring motifs as well, obviously religion is going to have a big part to play. Or you could maybe even just say it more simplistically and say it's faith is going to have a role to play. Because even as something as simplistic as the callings, or not callings, that's kind of like faith-based. They are trusting that whatever it is they're hearing in their heads is going to lead them into the right place. And hopefully, do good. Which it's not proven to be bad really at all. I mean, we even got to see that because Zeke had followed all of his callings and did what he had to do, by the time of his death date, I mean, that was it. Like, he did everything he needed to do, and he was given a second chance, which we'll even dive into that more as we get to the second story. But anyway, going back to Ben and Vance's storyline, I can't even quite remember the original point I was trying to make, but the fact that they're going to, at some point explain what's going on. It's just weird that, we had the kid who had the video of Ben touching the plane and then flying back and getting knocked out, unconscious. Like, what exactly caused that? Why would something, why would that happen? Now, if we do think it's some sort of mystical force in the show, then you could just say, with, like, everything like the calling, like, they're guiding them, they're doing this, that, and the other, but I don't think we've quite had anything like that happen. It's always been to guide and to help them. And then we had, like, obviously people kind of disappearing from time and then, showing back up a year later, a couple days later, 3 months later, as we'll also get into, and 5.5 years later. So, I'm kind of curious what that whole thing was about. And then also now the mark that he has on his hand. It almost reminds me of some sort of like cheap visual effect of like someone who's like glowing with radiation. I mean, which, heck, that might actually be it, because they did discuss back in the first season, like, they scanned the plane for radiation and stuff like that. But yeah, Ben's got that, like, cheap VFX, on his hand of it glowing, which, I mean, I wish they would have almost done something more with makeup, because this show does use visual effects quite a bit, and, I mean, it's an NBC show, it's not got the highest budget in the world, so I don't exactly blame them for having cheap visual effects, but in a show like this, they really should be careful about what visual effects they're using. Once again, not to go off too much on a tangent, but I think of a show like Lost, which has a, comparable feel to it. I mean, they didn't really use visual effects in that show. The most that they used visual effects, at least I can think of off the top of my head, is the smoke monster. That was it. But anyway, so they managed to get captured by the cops, and then Vance and his partner come in, which that guy's from Orange is the New Black. He was one of the original security guards in the minimum security prison. So it's kind of funny seeing him in something else. And then he made his guest appearance in the later seasons as well. But anyway, so they get captured by the cops, then Vance and his partner come in to save Ben, and then they pay off the guys, which those guys were just saying they wanted to get out of the country anyway, so they were hoping that it would be a big payday for them. And then they try to escape, which then Vance kind of blocks the exit way just long enough that the plane can lift out of Cuba's airfield, which, I mean, they could have probably still shot them out of the sky. If they would have called it in, or at least that's what I would have thought. Anyway, then we have the other big storyline of the episode is Mickey and Zeke, which are now, I guess, on like a 3-month honeymoon or something like that. They just decided to get away from it all because Zeke is free from the callings and Mickey hasn't had a calling, which no one has had a calling in, months. Which, except this episode, this is the first time in 3 months now that they had a calling, and which is the whole Mickey storyline. So they, get this, intense ringing sound as wind's being blown at a bunch of people, and they see a girl that they don't recognize, but obviously a girl that probably is or was on the flight or is connected with the flight, which we end up finding out she is. Now, this storyline, I feel like it's pretty cut and dry. The girl had super religious parents. She came back a little different from the plane, and she thought she was going crazy, and she's had all these, she's had all the callings, which she can't explain. I mean, to her, she's probably, thinking that she's going schizophrenic or something like that, because, she is at that age where something like that would manifest. But her parents lock her in a tiny, tiny room in the basement. It almost looks like it could be like a mini storage room for, wood or something. Which then it gets to the point where the girl's about to kill herself because she can't take her imprisonment, which who knows how long she's been down there. I don't think they exactly said how long she's been, quote-unquote, missing for. But I'd imagine it had at least been a month. I wouldn't even doubt it if it had been 2 or more months. Oh man, it could have been way longer than that, because at this point they had already been, I think they have been back for a year and a half, I think. Oh, I gotta really check out that timeline now. Yeah, I feel like they've been back for at least a year and a half, maybe even 2 years at this point. Because I'm fairly certain we saw 2 holiday seasons. Or, we've at least seen one, so it could be they're coming up on their year mark, or they're coming up on a 2-year mark. Because I think right now we're actually at the end of spring, beginning of summer. So actually we're about a season away from where they're really at. But anyway, so the Michaela and Zeke storyline was your very standard, typical, reoccurring storyline. They get the calling, they try and undo the mystery of who it is, where they're at, what's going on, and then they save the day. Which I think is something that this show often, falls into, writing-wise. And I think it's things like this that will really be the death of this show. Because I think they have a lot of great building blocks for this show, but I feel like the walls they're building are not the sturdiest. And sooner or later, when they build so many levels to this house, it is going to crumble because the initial walls and stuff is just flawed. Weird analogy. Don't even know if it's really the best analogy or if I really said it right. But anyway, you get my point, though. And we're already on season 3. I really don't know how much longer this season can go with its mysteries. Personally, I would love it if this season ended up being a 20-episode season where they wrapped up everything. Have maybe a mid-season finale. And then, because I kind of like the rule of 3s in film. And so they could go on a little summer break and then come back towards the end of summer and then finish up for the fall time slot. But anyway, that was the story. They found this girl, they decided the calling is back, and so the honeymoon's done, and they free the girl, and because they don't have her passport or anything, they take her on the plane, which Ben and them divert to Puerto Rico, so they are going to sneak her into the country, which is kind of crazy, and she's going to live with them, which I assume the parents have the passports, so I don't really understand how they didn't really clarify how they snuck her away from the parents. Anyway, so yeah, you have this new girl, and clearly she's got some issues, some PTSD maybe. She probably thought she was going crazy for a year or more. Then the third storyline. Oh, there's actually 5 storylines. I just remembered, not 4. But the next storyline's pretty simple. It's Olive, Cal, Grace. It's funny. Cal looks a lot older now. And I think they're trying to grow his hair out and style it in a way where he looks young, but not not as old as he probably really is at this point, because it's been, like I said, I think in the story it could be anywhere from a year to 2 years, and in real life I think he probably started filming this in 2018, and it's now 2021. So, I mean, that's, 3 years later from probably when they first started filming, but 4 years in total by the airing of this episode. Once again, really nothing much. Cal and Olive were able to determine who the girl was and send that information to Mickey, and Grace and also Cal and Olive got worried that they couldn't get a hold of Ben and that something was wrong. I didn't really care about the storyline. I'm happy it was probably one of the smaller ones, because I hate to say, because I actually feel really bad, but Cal's acting really is not good. He's very stiff in his movements, especially when he comes on a scene. He almost looks like, I don't know, one of the art dolls that you can flex so you can, make your designs and stuff like that. He's stiff in that way. Grace, I feel like actually Grace seemed better this season. She's an okay actress, still not the best. I feel like she could be doing a lot of sitcoms or maybe even like a soap opera. That's probably more, tuned to her style or her ability. Olive, I actually think, especially for her age, Olive is a pretty good actress. But I feel like they always write her characters into the same sort of lines and plots. So she often, it almost reminds me of like a Disney Channel star. She almost defaults into the same body language and facial expressions. But I think she's actually good, for her age and what she's been doing. And, she continues on this path. I could actually see her being, a pretty decent actor. And if she gets the right break, she could blow up to be something more. Then we had another really, really tiny storyline. A girl was coming into the police station looking for her mother, and she's being dismissed by the FBI and all the other police stations. But just by the way that Garrett, because she was looking for Michaela, because she thought that Michaela could be the best help, given that her mom was somehow involved with Flight 828, and she saw the way that Garrett was looking, so she waited around for Garrett, and lo and behold, one of the final twists of the episode was that's the Major's daughter, and the Major did not give her the coded signs to let her know she'd be gone, so I think her daughter knows that it's something more serious, which, as we do know, Sanvi kind of sort of accidentally killed her, but also the Major kind of killed herself by swatting away the only medicine that could have cured her. Which brings me to the final storyline. We have Sanvi. Now, Sanvi kind of is in a new normal. She's running in a clinic, which is also kind of a front for their whole operation with Vance and his crew, and also Ben. So we got to see a little bit of that, but we also saw a breakdown. She's listening to tapes of the Major and, she's listening to tapes of the Major, and she's crying about it because clearly it's, been deeply affecting her. Now, her daughter, I don't think is a kid. I think she's a young adult, probably in her early 20s, maybe mid-20s. I could see that. I don't really see too much older, and I think Sanvi's probably in her late 20s, if I had to guess. I wouldn't doubt it if Sanvi's grief actually drives the two of them together, but obviously Sanvi's not going to tell her daughter that she killed her, and I guarantee they're going to get into a romantic relationship. Calling it now, you have this podcast timestamped, so, when I say it later, you can always come back and see this. So I think that's kind of what's going on with Sanvi. And then another little twist that we got, which is not part of any of the major storylines, because like I said, there were 5 this episode, but the twist ending, the final segment was the meth heads resurfaced from the water, and they're here. So they were gone for 3 months. Now they have 3 months to adhere to the callings, or, something might happen. All right, so on that note, we're going to take a quick break. Next segment's going to be about Zerozerozero. I finished the final 2 episodes of the season, and we'll be talking about that.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
All right, and we are back. So in our last segment, we had talked about Season 3, Episode 1 of Manifest, kind of after they had that year break, and we kind of dipped into the details of what's going on in the story and kind of what I was feeling. So now we're going to pivot, and we're going to talk about Zerozerozero, which I previously had talked about it on a podcast maybe a couple episodes ago. So I finally watched the final 2 episodes. Now, once again, there will probably be spoilers for this episode. But I guess before I even get into those spoilers, just for someone who hasn't heard the previous podcast, Zerozerozero is, I guess, technically an Italian-produced crime drama that takes place, all around the world, really, but there are 3 main storylines. There is the Italian Mafia, literally the Italian Mafia in Italy, and it's sort of a power struggle in a sense. You have the grandfather, who is the Don of the whole family, and then you have Stefano, who's the grandson, and he is in a pretty good position. But you have the Don did something that I don't really think they ever really dipped into, that kind of hurt all the Italian families, but he's got a plan to, I guess, bring prominence back to that crime syndicate and unite all the families again. So he's going to get $1 billion worth of cocaine shipped to Italy. So you have that storyline and the craziness that ensues with some of the people who aren't very happy with his return. So they are the distribution. Then you shift to the manufacturer storyline, which all takes place in Monterrey, Mexico, where you have a, what are they called? The narcos down there, and they have pretty much control of a lot of the drugs. They manufacture an insane amount of cocaine, and there's also a bunch of little tiny neighborhood gangs, but the narcos don't really bother with messing with them because they generally stay out of each other's ways, and the neighborhood gangs will fight with each other just because the narcos doesn't have an army enough to kind of take them all out. But that's not even the primary storyline in the Mexico portion of the show. It actually is about a soldier by the name of Manuel, and I think his call sign is Vampire, which factors into the story a little bit later. Nothing too crucial. But anyway, so Manuel is working for the Mexico military, but he gets paid off with him and his crew. They get paid off to do crimes. And then the third storyline is the Americans. It's the Linwood family. So the Linwood family, they ship freighters, or the freighters ship product to a bunch of different countries around the world. Just I think from the sound of it, it's mostly food items. But they have a lot of really deep connections with a lot of old prominent families. And so the Linwoods, inside their food, have cocaine, and they ship the food to, certain areas so they can get it. So Italy wants $1 billion worth of cocaine. Mexico makes it, and the Americans, the brokers, they ship it to Italy. Well, with the power struggle in Italy, it causes a lot of different conflict and makes it really difficult for the brokers to do their job, while Mexico has a lot of its own internal issues. So anyway, that's just kind of a brief overview of the show. It's very interesting. It's only 8 episodes long. I would suggest watching it. There might be a season 2, there might not be a season 2, which I'll get into that at the end. But if you don't want any spoilers on the show, hopefully that was enough to entice you. So moving on now to the final 2 episodes in the series, so the season, episodes 7 and 8. 7 was an interesting one because we had a huge cliffhanger at the end of episode 6 with the Mexican storyline, and so I was a little upset we didn't get any of the Mexico storyline at all, but we had more so a development in Chris's personal story, and then a huge shove in the overall plot with Italy. This whole time I was under the assumption that, Stefano was the one that was truly having this power struggle with his grandfather to kind of rule over the families. But really, there was another family, one of the disgruntled families, who wanted control, and they were kind of using Stefano. They were together, I guess, also, you could say, in a sense. But, yes, Stefano, they figured out that he shot himself, and then he let his grandfather get away, which then caused this huge issue with his family. And I felt so bad because his family, they were doing everything they could to kind of hide from the rest of the other families, like the crime families, not an actual biological family. But somehow they still caught him, and they don't really explain how that happened. And, maybe part of that is they didn't really exactly find it a crucial detail to tell, or maybe I missed something because, 2/3 of this show, are subtitled, because you have maybe even more of that. Yeah, because like I said, you have the Italian storyline. They're speaking Italian. And when they're in Mexico, they're speaking Mexican. And then the Americans who are traveling the world, they're in Africa at one point, so they're speaking Wolof. They're speaking French, depending on, what country they're in, and a little bit of Arabic, especially when they come across I guess it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS or whoever the group is. It was a group of terrorists. They actually were, there was a whole episode about it. But, yeah, so it was really interesting. I liked actually seeing Chris's little love storyline with one of the port women, who was helping them along with their shipment. Her name was Amina. And so, Chris, his disease, was getting a little worse, and he peed himself, and so he's getting really frustrated. So we saw about, kind of what he wanted in the future, and he wanted love, which was it was a nice little direction for him, and I think it was a realistic direction as well, because it's the thing that he is being robbed of as, you could say a character, or just straight up as a person, because his whole future is going to be destroyed, as they've seen with their mom. Now, whether he wanted kids or wants kids or whatever in the future, it's not something that's really discussed and probably isn't a whole lot relevant. But, he wanted love, and he's never been in love, and I think he's supposed to be around, I think he's actually 30 years old. So we got a really nice moment with him and Amina, and, in one way as a viewer, I want that to work out for him, but then in another way, thinking about it more critically, I kind of hate that cliche, and I was just like, ugh, God, just let them have, a really good night, and, let them move on. Maybe they'll talk later down the line, maybe not, but, you don't spend a night dancing with the girl and then hook up with her and you're in love. I mean, I don't care what people say, that's just not how love works. But the big thing is that with the Italian plot moving along and them needing to stop the shipment, who do they go to? They have to find Emma or Chris, and they find Chris. And Chris stalls them just long enough to get the shipment on the boat and the boat on its way to Italy. And they get frustrated, and Stefano kills Chris. I was stunned. I kind of was not thinking that was going to happen, because I really felt like from the very first episode that this was Chris's story more than anything else. And obviously, it's in a sense an ensemble cast. You know, you got multiple main characters. Every storyline is a main character. And while Emma is still very prominent, I feel like Chris's screen time was definitely more. And so I was really thinking that, you know, he was going to be a huge part in the end of the show. But no, yeah, he not only punched him in the face multiple times, like, you know, really breaking up his face, but then he started to just slam his head into the concrete. And when I saw all that blood spilling out, I was like, there's no way. That's way too much blood for them to miraculously, you know, for him to miraculously, like, live. And, yeah, that's what happened. So they started off the next episode with Emma at the port, and she returns back to the apartment and can't find Chris, but she finds Amina tied up in the apartment. And it's funny, she's not really even worried about untying Amina. She just wants to know where her brother is, which is kind of understandable. And then until Amina tells her, then she unties her. And then, so it's kind of really heartbreaking to see Emma then come onto the scene and find her brother dead, which she did the same thing with her brother, if anyone who watches this remembers, that she did with her dad at the beginning of the second episode. Her and her brother, they had their dad's dead body after, I guess, he had been embalmed and all that other stuff, because he was dressed in his funeral attire. They had him laying on his bed at their home, and they, like, kind of laid with him. They laid with the body. It's just really, really weird. You know, I could see, you know, at least with Chris in the heat of the moment, you know, you kind of like drop to your knees and like kind of embrace them before the warmth leaves their body. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, something about it just kind of creeps me out. It just makes me feel uneasy, but I know that everyone copes with death in different ways, so I mean, who am I to really say anything? So then on the opposite side of the fence, you have the Stefano family, you know, that whole Italian storyline. So they still have Stefano's mother, or Stefano's wife and son, and, you know, they're kind of in this little, like, farm area, and Stefano's going to meet up with his grandfather to kill him because that's what they want, although I don't know if he would have actually done it at all. But lo and behold, Emma was there first. Emma told Don Minu what was going on, and Don Minu, which I don't even know if Emma would have had it in her, but he killed Stefano. And while I think Stefano was a dick to Emma, especially in the beginning of the show, and he also did a lot of crazy stuff, I feel bad because at the end of the day, he still has a wife and a son. And I also feel really bad for Don Minu because he had to kill his grandson. And in addition to that, he is also the one who killed his own son all those years ago. So Don Minu is alone. He's got pretty much no family. He's got Stefano's wife and his great-grandson, but that's it. The rest of his family's gone. So that was really sad. And then, so that kind of wraps up the Italian storyline, you know. They get the drugs, and kind of all is well. They also took out the rival family and freed the wife and son, Stefano's wife and son. So that was the Italian storyline. So that actually wrapped up pretty nice. And then the final storyline, which actually is a storyline that really grew on me. And I think it might be my favorite of the three, although I do admit I was very much invested in the Linwoods, with the Manuel, or, you know, his vampires, his little troops. They, after everything that happened in the episode previous, they attacked the Narcos, which also, I guess the episode started out with Manuel, you know, telling the pregnant woman that, you know, he killed her husband, which was kind of interesting little twist for his character, because he's not a very open person, but you could tell he's very much cared for her. But I think he knew that would break things off, and especially with him potentially either going to die in this raid or become the new Narcos, it's best that he put, distance, because she might be unfairly targeted, even though that's not his daughter and that's not his girlfriend or wife. But yeah, they freaking went into the Leiros, the Narcos' house while they were having a party for their kids, and they just wiped out the whole crime family. And in addition to that, they even wiped out a number of guests, and I could see one kid too, which was pretty sad. We don't know what happened to the one Leiros' wife and kids, because they had like 4 kids. We only saw them being taken away, but as to their execution, we don't know. But I loved it. It was really good. That whole storyline, just to be able to see how Manuel came from kind of nothing but being a good soldier to raising an army for the Narcos, messing him over with money, and then him wiping them all out after the confrontation from 2 episodes ago. I really liked his arc, and you almost see him as this cold, manipulative, calculating guy, but I think there's a deeper side to him that he doesn't quite know how to express, and I think it's been easier for him given, what kind of soldier he was in. So the very final scene of the show is Emma leaves Italy and goes to the Leiros' house to give them their money now that the transaction's been completed. But when she gets there, they're all wiped out, and she doesn't really seem unfazed by it. And she goes in the meeting room, and both of the Leiros brothers are dead on the couch, and she's like kind of forced to sit in between their bodies as she meets Manuel, who I guess is the new head of the crime syndicate, or the Narcos, and he united all the neighborhood gangs together. So interesting. Like, I love that storyline, but I was cracking up because it's a bit of dark humor. Like, obviously that was meant to be a humorous scene. But, so she meets him, she gives him the money, and, which is way more than he would have gotten, from the missed payments that the Leiros brothers didn't give him. But she says, hey, look, this is what I need next. Can you get it to me? He's like, yeah. She's like, cool, because I need to get it to Russia. And that's more or less how the series ends. Like, I actually thought it was a really good show. I know it was originally penned as a mini-series because it's based off of a kind of a shorter book. But yeah, I really liked it, and I think they have the possibility to move into a season 2. I think the Italian storyline's done, although they could still revisit that and see what the effects of everything, after everything happened. But I think the big focus would be Manuel and his army taking on, any potential up-and-comers, as well as Emma and her transaction, with Russia, or even whatever. It could be even further in the future. But also I think I would be fine with it just ending where it's at. So anyway, on that note, also one little tidbit that I actually kind of missed in my notes is that it also has a 94 approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, I mean, some people don't like Rotten Tomato, but 94% of all critics liked it. So, but anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be talking about the final episodes of Mr. Robot.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, and we are back. So before we went on the break, we talked about the show Zerozerozero, the drama crime show. Not sure if anyone kind of skipped ahead if they didn't want any spoilers, but definitely check it out. Like I said, I actually don't think I said it, but I did say it in a previous podcast. Zerozerozero can be found on Amazon Prime, so if you get the time, watch it. Hour episodes, 8 episodes each, they're pretty good. So, we're going to move on to Mr. Robot. Now, I've been trying to stretch this show out for as long as possible, and, well, I finished it. I'm so sad that it's over, because I feel like it's not often that you really, truly come across great shows. Now, with Mr. Robot, before I get into the series finale, I'll preface it with some stuff and even go, and tell you a little bit about it before I get into the spoiler section. So, with Mr. Robot, it aired on USA. Some of the episodes were definitely longer than an hour. I feel like this show is, and I said it before too, but it is a kind of a hidden gem. The first season of the show was averaging, I believe, 1.7 million viewers, and it only ran for 4 seasons, from 2015 and ended in 2019. I believe they did take a break one of the years. I think it was 2018. Yeah, so it was, the first season was 2015, second season was 2016, third season was 2017. They took a year break for 2018 and came back with a final season in 2019. Now, generally speaking, most of the seasons are about 10 episodes, with the longest, I think, being the 4th season at 13 episodes, which I think in part had to do with the fact that they almost did a 5th season of the show, but then as they were analyzing what was left of the actual story, they said that it did not make sense to do a whole other season when they could just extend the 4th season a few episodes and the whole story would be wrapped up. And honestly, everyone wants a new season of, their favorite shows or really good shows. But I don't think we need it oftentimes, and I think oftentimes that's what really ruins shows, is the stretching of the storylines. The creator of Mr. Robot, being Sam Esmail, if that's how you say his last name, he originally envisioned Mr. Robot as a movie, and he was writing the script for it, years ago, and I can't quite remember, but I believe it was like the script would have amounted to like a 2 to 3 hour movie. And so as he was like finishing the first draft of it or whatever, he was just like, this needs to be a show. It could be much better as a show. And so he had the general, story already done. So, for the actual show itself, I mean, he doesn't really get into the details of what actually stayed and what actually went, but he does say that the beginning and the end of the show, Mr. Robot, was known all along. He had it planned. He had it written out when he was doing his movie. And I think right there, that is what makes some of these shows stand apart. People that actually have things planned out. I think, another good example of that is Vince Gilligan for Breaking Bad. And so far, from what we can see, Better Call Saul. Vince Gilligan might not have all the finer details of his shows lined up, but I'm fairly certain he had the beginning and the ending of Breaking Bad. He knew what the premise was and how it was going to start, and I think he had a general idea of how it was going to end. I think he has said before, in interviews, that it's crazy to have all the details worked out, but to not have an ending. I hope I'm not mixing his interview up, but to not have an ending, for a show is just crazy. But I'll say this though, television, we are in an unprecedented time of television. We are truly in the golden age of television, at that. So oftentimes, and I might have talked about it with when I talked about Lost before, so I apologize because I watch a lot of TV and I talk to a lot of people about TV, so sometimes it's hard to differentiate what I officially actually talked about detail-wise in these podcasts. But, with Lost and, a lot of other shows, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even, most of the 2000s and the early 2010s, networks did not have this is point A, this is point B, and this is point C for this TV show, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be 3 seasons. We know the beginning, the middle, the end, and boom. No, it's, okay, pitch a season, pitch a story. All right, cool. I like it. Let's do a pilot. Pilot's there. Everyone really likes it. Maybe it needs this tweak. Maybe it needs that tweak. Cool. We're going to do it. The ratings are awesome for season 1. Cool. Order a season 2. The ratings are down for season 2. Maybe we'll order a season 3. The ratings are back up for season 3. Cool. Season 4. So, that's the thing. People don't know when they were going to get canceled. People also, in a lot of these studios, they were just told that, hey, you have to do another season. People could quit, but if you quit on that project, it doesn't really matter because what are they going to do? They're going to find someone else to replace you, and the show's going to go on anyway. And that was the thing with Lost. Lost was so compelling that they ended up, at one point, I think they were trying to tell them, oh yeah, we'll make you guys do, we'll let you guys have an out at around the 9 or 10 season mark. And they're like, dude, we just did season 3, and season 3's, we need to do a massive shift because it's clearly not being received that well. How do you expect us to do another 6 to 7 seasons of this? So once again, unprecedented time. Mr. Robot's had it planned from the beginning to the end. But ultimately, my original point being was that, Mr. Robot is sort of a hidden gem. It is an incredibly well thought out show. It is very accurate, which is both in its depiction of hacking, because that's what the whole show is built around, as well as the mental health aspect of the show and certain, social aspects of the show being like social anxiety. Stuff like that. They had professionals, real professionals, especially for the hacking people that used to work in government for their cybersecurity stuff. So all that stuff was really, really well accurate. Was well done and it was accurate. So yeah, by the 4th season though, and I think part of it was the year break probably hurt them quite a bit. I think they were averaging like 700,000 views. So, I mean, you start the show going at 1.7 million averaging to the final season of, 0.7 averaging or something like that. But yeah, I just feel like most people didn't know about this. I barely knew about it. I only knew about it because the premiere monologue was, floating around online. And then it's unfortunate that it took this long. And even, it's gotten a fair amount of recognition with its nominations, in award ceremonies. But I think at the end of the day, it's only actually received 2 Golden Globes, 2 Emmys, and a Peabody Award. This is a show that deserves that and so much more. But anyway, I've kind of talked a lot about just the general gist of the show. But before I actually get into my series finale, for anyone that doesn't know, Mr. Robot is a drama thriller that stars Rami Malek and Christian Slater. And Rami Malek plays the main character, Elliot Alderson, who is a cybersecurity engineer and also a hacker who has a social anxiety disorder and clinical depression. Elliot is then recruited by an insurrectionist anarchist known as Mr. Robot, who is once again played by Christian Slater. And he recruits Elliot to join a group of hacktivists called F Society, which I'm sure you guys can take 2 seconds to think about this and know what the letter F society is. And then the ultimate goal of F society is to destroy all worldwide debt records by encrypting the financial files of E Corp, who is the largest conglomerate, or what is the largest conglomerate in the world. So, for anyone that doesn't know, the word encryption is, it's just making something unreadable, essentially. It's kind of like if you're, writing in code, think of it like that. But if you can't crack the encryption, which was the whole point of what F Society wants to do, then all the financial records, what debt people had, what money they had in the bank, all that stuff, it's useless. So the world's debt-free. But also, if anyone has ever had any savings, then they don't anymore. So it kind of wipes the slate clean so everyone's on the same page. Anyway, I talked about all that a lot at this point. So we're going to kind of go into the series finale now. So spoilers ahead probably for the next 4 to 5 minutes if you don't want to hear. The last couple episodes, I wasn't super keen on them, if I'm being completely honest, because we are led to believe that White Rose's machine worked and that Elliot and the rest of the world are in, this parallel universe, which it was interesting, I guess, their misdirection. And, I figured out pretty early on once they introduced that's probably the direction they were going. But I hope that was more of I was hoping that it was more of a delusion, a dream that White Rose was really clinging to. But anyway, yeah, so the last couple episodes take place in this world, this fantasy world, which we find out as things very quickly crumble for Elliot when he kills his parallel universe self, and the body gets discovered by the cop, who is Dom, and all this stuff as the world crumbles apart. He figures out that, the world's not really this parallel world. This is just a prison, as they call it, in his mind. Which I think my original guess, once they introduced this parallel world, was that it was going to be a simulation. But in the reality of it, I really wasn't far off. It's a mental simulation, whereas I was originally thinking it was a technical simulation. Someone was, forcing him or created this world to imprison his brain in, when really it was his alters. Now, it's funny, though, I think this is the first episode in the series finale that they actually mentioned within the whole series that he has DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. So he's got alters, and, I said that also from early on. I knew that, he had alters, and that, there wasn't just Mr. Robot. It was going to be so much more than Mr. Robot. But the cool twist ending, which I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, was that the Elliot we got to know over the course of 4 seasons wasn't even really Elliot. It was an alter known as the Mastermind. And I was like, do I like this? Do I not like this? And so the cool thing is that during this whole revelation sequence, which felt very long, had to have been like minimally 5 minutes, not long in a bad way, but there was just like a huge conversation leading into it, and then the revelation itself, and then the fallout of the revelation. And so they showed you all the scenes going back to the very first season, and lo and behold, this is how because you could dismiss Sam Esmail's word for that he had this whole thing planned out beforehand, but I mean, look at the evidence. They literally showed you scenes from the first 3 seasons and even part of the 4th season that connected to this whole thing. And so I really liked it. And then, he wakes up in the real world, and the mastermind wakes up in Elliot's body in the real world. He has a conversation with Darlene, and then instead of keeping control, he realizes that it's time to give up control. And so they also explain the function of each of the altars, and even as they characterize us, the viewers, as the voyeurs, so they recognize our presence, which is kind of funny. It's very fourth wall breaking. But then again, Elliot's always done that in the show. But yeah, so Mr. Robot was the dad he never had. He was kind of like the muscle, the protector. The mastermind was sort of the anger and the justice in a sense, trying to protect Elliot, a different type of protection, an external protection, or an internal protection from the effects of the world. And then the son represented I forget exactly what he represented, but he represented obviously his younger self. And I think a part of the innocence, to help him shield from certain issues that he's dealing with, especially with his him being molested as a kid. And then the mom was, I think, a sense of blaming, because the mom was said to be pretty abusive anyway, so he created an altar for when she wasn't even around anymore to still fill that role, which is kind of weird, because usually altars, they're created to stop something from the host experiencing something, which all the altars had that role. With that too, we finally see that White Rose is dead on the news, which is what we had seen a few episodes before. And, I mean, that was good, because White Rose was truly delusional and really wanted to believe in this, and, in a sense, helped her crumble her whole project, her whole, hacktivist terrorist organization. And then you kind of got a really nice moment where all the altars sat in the movie theater, which was a kind of a throwback to when Elliot's dad died. It was the first thing he did when his dad died. It kind of freed him in a sense, but he had those altars. I've really liked the show, and like I said, I think it was well planned out from start to finish. I just really wish that in the end, I wanted to see more. We did get a conclusion on a lot of people's storylines, although a lot of people had really terrible fates by the end of their stories because a lot of them died. But like Dom, I kind of wanted to see a little bit more of Dom, or maybe even Darlene. What about the real Elliot? This entire time we never actually got to see the real Elliot. Krista, what happened with Krista as well, But I would say that it ultimately doesn't take away from the show. It's more of a subjective preference. I think objectively still, the way that they ended it was a good ending. All right, on that note, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back for our last segment, which is kind of TV streaming and the award ceremonies with each of them.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back. We are back for our final segment. Previously, we started talking about Mr. Robot. We talked about kind of a general overview of the show, and then we kind of dipped into the finale. So Hopefully anyone is back because we are done talking about spoilers. And we are headed into our last topic, which is kind of just a general look at TV shows in relation to streaming services, web shows, and the awards ceremonies. So we're going to get right into it. So, for those who don't know, web shows have been around for quite some time. I know most people tend to think of web shows as a YouTube thing, because obviously YouTube is the largest, video library on the internet. And you can, depending on how you exactly look at the word streaming, whether it's by its literal diction or its connotation, there's many different, possibilities for web shows that are just more than YouTube. So the very first web series was called Global Valley Idiots, which was like a kind of like a public access show in Indiana. So they had that public access show, and instead of, I think, it being aired on the actual public access channel, it was aired online. So most people, if not pretty much all people, credit that to being the very first web series. Now, I myself have not seen it. I don't even know if it's actually really available to watch nowadays, because sometimes clips from back then are a little bit harder to find. I mean, look at, the invention of YouTube. The whole point of YouTube, I think it had 3 creators, but the initial creator, the guy who came up with the concept of YouTube, he was looking for a specific clip on the internet and could not find it anywhere. And so his overall idea was, wow, what if there was a website where everyone and anyone could upload whatever videos they wanted to, that they might have recorded on TV or, whatever. Now, the funny thing is that it actually was in response to what happened at the Super Bowl in 2004. Which was the whole Justin Timberlake, Janet Jackson thing, which is funny. It has now, resurfaced again due to the Free Britney documentary and the backlash that Justin's gotten. Because for those who don't know, Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson, they 100% planned that whole thing, and they weren't expecting there to be such tremendous backlash, I think, and so they had to deny, and when it came down to it, everyone blamed Janet and not Justin, who, even if that whole thing wasn't planned, Justin's the one that ripped it off of her. So, anyway, I kind of digress a bit. So that was kind of the start of YouTube. Now, over the years, you had YouTube's inception, I believe, to be around 2005, but it wasn't about 2006 until Google bought out YouTube and really elevated it to what we know today. I remember being in 6th grade, and we were on one of the computers in like our history class, and the old layout, oh man, I can't even describe it, but I could picture it so perfectly. But very quickly after, YouTube was bought out by Google, I mean, it was a massive overhaul, and definitely was, done for the better. But anyway, so YouTube obviously has had many web series. I especially can remember, like, probably around 2007, 2008, you had the, if I remember correctly, I believe it was Lonely Girl. Lonely Girl sounds about right. She ran a vlog, which obviously wasn't a real vlog, and it was about her story, and it was just kind of like crazy. And then I think by like the end of the second season of the show, or second set of videos, it was revealed that there was a huge production company behind it, and that was kind of unprecedented. Also, in the early 2000s, non-YouTube related, you also had a show called Whirl Girl, which I believe originally did start as a web series that Showtime then ended up picking up as an actual show, if I remember that correctly. But anyway, it's just really interesting because you have so many of these YouTube shows that, you know, a lot of companies really started to put their backing into in the mid-2000s to late 2000s. And some of the qualities were really good. And then, you know, you have other actual network television shows. You know, I think of, you had like Tim and Eric Awesome Show, Great Job. Tom Goes to the Mayor. Check It Out with Dr. Steve Brule. Now, granted, those are all by the same creators, but you also had a lot of other shows that were on Adult Swim that also were only, you know, 11 to 12-minute episodes. So it wasn't really all that different from the web series that were on YouTube and other services. And so, you know, these shows that were really short on network television, you know, they got the attention and even the recognition that they deserved in terms of, you know, any sort of accolades or awards. But it's just kind of a shame, you know, that just because something was uploaded to YouTube, and even though it had a great production quality, even better than some shows, maybe even on, you know, regular television, they didn't get the right, all the awards they deserved is ultimately what I'm trying to say. You know, you also had in 2009, YouTube, I believe, in partnership with, I think one of Dick Clark's, his like company, they launched the Streamies. Now the Streamies, were to specifically, you know, give recognition to all of those, you know, hardworking YouTubers out there and other web series, you know, all the recognition they deserved. And things like The Guild and the Battlestar Galactica online series, Dr. Horrible Sing-Along blog, like all that kind of stuff finally started to get recognized. And I think of, you know, especially The Guild, and even the Battlestar, I mean, they had major production companies backing them. Battlestar Galactica was on Sci-Fi. The Guild, while it had some lesser-known actors, it had the backing of a lot of money. I don't think any really prominent production companies, actually, now that I think about it. Dr. Horrible Sing-Along blog, that was another one. It had the backing of Mutant Enemy Productions, which is Joss Whedon's production company, the guy who did Buffy, Angel, and even is the one in all the hot water right now for the way he treats his actors and stuff like that. With, you know, everything that's come out since the Justice League pretty much has come out. So I mean, it's not really. It's not really fair that these shows did not get the recognition. But, you know, a big game changer in streaming television shows, or even what still could literally be called a web series, is in 2013, Netflix. Netflix changed the game. So in 2013, they had a couple shows that came out, but the first one, in collaboration with David Fincher, they created House of Cards. The second one was Hemlock Grove, that came out maybe a couple months after that, and then in July of that year, they came out with Orange is the New Black. Now, I don't 100% know what the statistics are now with, you know, some of the more popular recent shows being like Stranger Things and even Bridgerton, as I did previously talk about before. But Orange is the New Black, I believe, as a series, as a whole series, has the most viewership of any Netflix show. And with Orange is the New Black, it also had 7 seasons, whereas most Netflix shows only have 3 seasons, and Netflix keeps it that way because usually when you do a little bit more than that, you really got to pay your actors, and Netflix does not want to do that. I mean, they pretty much came out and already said, you know, that's kind of the case. Plus, I think 3 seasons to wrap up a lot of shows, especially if you give them all the time and energy they deserve, 3 seasons should be more than enough. I think also Netflix really just has the short format, you know, really ironed down, whereas Disney Plus, I think, is still kind of struggling with that, if I'm being honest. But anyway, kind of digress. So yeah, Netflix is a streaming service. It is a website. It is an application. It is not a television network. It has become its own production company. So at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot of difference between that of some of the production companies backing, YouTube series. So you can make a legitimate argument in saying that House of Cards is a web series. Now, just because something is a web series does not mean it's lesser than. I mean, going back to Battlestar Galactica, they had a couple web series, but their one web series, Blood and Chrome, which aired on, if I remember how to pronounce their name right, Machinima. I believe it's spelled very similar to Deus Ex Machina. But yeah, they did a lot of like nerdy stuff, a lot of game stuff on YouTube, and they released a mini series that later was just kind of all patched together. A mini series that is also a web series on YouTube that was patched together into being like an hour and a half movie. That was kind of like a prequel movie to the series, like a prequel movie to the series. But anyway, yeah, I'd argue that you could very easily say that any of those Netflix shows are, at the core of it, web series. And in 2013, all of those shows started to gain massive recognition, and they started to get nominated for awards, and they started to win awards. I feel like there was this reluctancy to acknowledge some of these TV shows, and even on the movie side of things too, there was a reluctancy to acknowledge some of these movies that debuted on Netflix or other streaming services in the Oscars. I guess luckily, people were a little bit more welcoming in the Emmy side and Golden Globe side, but even so, I still think people look down upon it. And YouTube right now is starting to become somewhat prominent in their streaming and their web content. And I think they also have the Roundtable by Jada Pinkett Smith, and I don't think Will Smith technically does it. I think it's just the women in the family that do it. But, I mean, they are, they're rising up. I feel like in a sense they're almost the rejects of the social media / streaming stuff, because there's a lot of YouTubers that were kind of banned from doing their thing, and they just went to Facebook and they re-uploaded all their stuff, and there's really no way, or not no way, but Facebook doesn't really crack down on copyright and controversies as hard as YouTube and other companies do. So it's just very interesting to see how that goes. Like, even I myself right now am working on a reality web series, and I mean, granted, I know it's not going to be anything that'll ever be big, but I think it would be really cool if it got the recognition, if it blew up to be something big. It would be cool if it got the recognition it deserves. That's if it even turns out well. But anyway, kind of winding things down. So, you have these many different apps and streaming services that I think need to be recognized as television, because even though there is a literal definition of what is television versus what isn't, I think we've loosened up on the definition and it's developed its own connotation. So I think we need to acknowledge some of the other ones, and I think a good example of that, which is how we're going to kind of end things, is Cobra Kai. So for those who don't know, Cobra Kai is a TV series or a web series that originally aired on YouTube Red, which has been rebranded for a second time now. So its newest name, its third name, is YouTube Premium. But I believe when it was YouTube Red, Cobra Kai aired on 2 seasons on YouTube Red. Now, Cobra Kai is a far in advanced sequel to the original Karate Kid, although I have not actually watched it myself. It has now taken on characters from the second and third, and I think there was even a fourth Karate Kid too. So it had gained so much popularity. It's probably YouTube's most successful show. I don't really think it got any awards, like prominent ones, or even nominations while it was on YouTube Red, but ever since it's been on Netflix, because Netflix acquired the rights to it for season 3, and I believe they're doing a season 4 now, it's gotten so much more attention, and in the month that it dropped on Netflix became the most watched Netflix show for that month, not of all time. So I think, as the years go on, there's a future for web series and streaming. We'll just kind of have to stay tuned, and, hopefully, for all those little guys out there, myself included, if we create a web series and it's successful, I think we deserve the recognition for all the attention and dedication we put into our shows. So let's hope that can happen. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice little review, because it really does help us. And also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, it would greatly be appreciated. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.